The scream cut through the silver-lit restaurant like a blade. Glass shattered. Chairs scraped. Guests froze mid-breath. And in the center of the polished marble floor, Maya lay curled on her side, her apron torn, her palms trembling, while CEO Grant Wallace drove his heel toward her ribs again, rage twisting his face into something monstrous. "Please, please stop kicking me!" Maya choked out, eyes wet with terror. No one moved. No one spoke. A room full of power. And not one person dared breathe against the man who owned half the skyscrapers in the district. Except one. Daniel Hayes, millionaire investor, seated 3 tables away, rose slowly, disbelief breaking into horror as Grant lifted his foot again. The next second would change everything. Before that scream shattered the night, Maya Thompson had already lived a lifetime of battles. She was 26, a single mother, and the quiet backbone of the MILLIONAIRE, the kind of restaurant where billionaires argued over wine prices that equaled her monthly rent. She worked doubles 3 times a week, wiped tears in the restroom between shifts, and still went home to help her daughter with homework before collapsing into bed. People saw her apron, not her brilliance, not the resilience behind her tired smile. Grant Wallace, on the other hand, came from a world where apologies were optional and consequences were for other people. CEO of Wallace Capital, famous for discipline, feared by his board, a man who climbed by stepping on those beneath him, literally. And then there was Daniel Hayes, 40, widower, millionaire by strategy, not cruelty, a man who once built hospitals in his wife's name after losing her to cancer. Tonight was his first attempt at a normal dinner after 6 months of silence. He noticed Maya the moment she kindly picked up a broken glass for a nervous trainee. He also noticed Grant, loud, entitled, impatient. And destiny noticed all 3. What happened on that marble floor wasn't just brutality. It was a collision of 3 lives heading toward a reckoning. Maya's job, safety and dignity hung by a thread. Grant Wallace's power towered like a weapon sharpened by wealth. And Daniel Hayes stood at a crossroads he never asked for. One choice could destroy him. Another could save her, hours before Grant's heel struck her ribs. Maya had done what she always did, quietly carry the weight of everyone else. She had knelt beside a young boy at table 7, tying his shoelace with a smile because his embarrassed father couldn't bend in his expensive suit. She replaced a single wilted flower in the lobby vase, whispering, "Everything deserves a little care," Daniel noticed. He saw the gentleness in her movements, the way she steadied a trembling trainee's hand before they spilled an entire tray. He saw the warmth Maya carried, even when her own world barely held together. Grant noticed her too, but only to mock her pace, correct her posture, snap his fingers for water he didn't want. To him, Maya was furniture, a body that existed only to absorb his moods. Yet when she laughed softly with the trainee, something flickered in Daniel's chest. A reminder of the kindness his wife once carried like light. Maya didn't know it. But her small acts of humanity had already placed Daniel on her side, long before fate forced his hand. The moment Grant's shoe finally stopped, the restaurant manager rushed in, not to help Maya, but to protect the man who signed his paycheck. Staff area. "Now!" he hissed, gripping Maya's arm as if she were the problem. Grant adjusted his cufflinks, already crafting a narrative dripping with lies. She slipped. "Clumsy girl nearly ruined my suit. Handle it!" The staff exchanged terrified glances. They had seen this before. Grant exploding, then rewriting reality. But this time, someone else had seen everything, Daniel. He stayed behind, studying Grant with a stillness that felt dangerous. Maya wasn't just injured. She was about to be erased, and Daniel Hayes felt something shift inside him. He would not let that happen. They dragged Maya down the narrow service hallway, past stacked plates and humming freezers, a hidden world where staff were punished out of sight. Daniel followed at a distance, each step heavier than the last. Grant's threats echoed behind them. his voice dripping with arrogance. The confrontation corridor had begun. Grant Wallace strode into the service corridor like a storm in an expensive suit. He blocked Daniel's path, leaning in with a predatory smirk. "You don't interfere in my house," he hissed. "That waitress exists because I allow it." He jabbed a finger into Daniel's chest. "Walk away now, or you'll regret choosing her." A final threat before the war truly began. The service office felt colder than the dining hall outside, a cramped, fluorescent-lit box where apologies were extracted, not earned. Maya sat on a metal chair, hands trembling in her lap, breath shallow from the bruise forming along her ribs. The manager hovered beside her like a frightened shadow, rehearsing the script Grant forced on every employee unlucky enough to anger him. "Just say you slipped," he whispered urgently. "Do it, Maya, please. He'll fire half the staff if you fight this." Maya stared at the floor. She had said those words before. Too many times. Tonight, they lodged in her throat like shards of glass. Grant entered without knocking. His presence swallowed the room, expensive cologne, cold fury, polished shoes that still carried traces of cruelty. He smoothed his suit sleeve with theatrical disdain. "Well?" he snapped. "Go on." "Tell the truth." "My truth." Maya didn't look up. Grant stepped closer, his shadow falling over her like a closing curtain. "You nearly tripped into my table," he said loudly, as if the walls were recording him. "You endangered a client. You disrespected me. And now you're going to fix it." Silence. Maya finally raised her eyes. Her voice shook. "I didn't slip, sir." Grant's jaw tightened. "Try again." The manager flinched visibly. He knew what came next. Maya swallowed. "You kicked me?" Grant's hand slammed against the metal table, making her jump. "Enough!" His voice exploded, filling every corner of the tiny room. "You people don't get to rewrite narratives. I will bury you under lawsuits if you dare accuse me of—" A new voice echoed from the doorway. "Is that why you kicked her, Grant? To protect your narrative?" The room fell silent. Daniel Hayes stood at the threshold, hands in pockets, posture calm, eyes burning with something dangerous. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't intimidated, and he wasn't leaving. Grant blinked in disbelief. "You followed us?" Daniel stepped inside with steady confidence. "I watched you assault her, and now I'm watching you lie about it." The manager instinctively positioned himself between them. "Sir, this is a private matter." "No," Daniel said softly. "It became public the moment he used violence." Grant straightened. "You think your money gives you authority here?" Daniel's voice dropped to a near whisper. "No, her pain does," Maya exhaled shakily. It was the first breath she'd taken in minutes. Grant scoffed. "She wants to keep her job. She'll say whatever I tell her. Isn't that right, Maya?" Maya closed her eyes. A single tear slipped out. Daniel stepped forward. "That sounded like intimidation." Grant turned sharply. "Stay out of this, Hayes. I don't know who you think you are, but—" Daniel interrupted, voice calm, almost chilling. "You know exactly who I am," Grant faltered. He did know. Everyone knew Daniel Hayes, investor, founder, majority shareholder in 2 multinational companies. A man who could quietly ruin a corporation with a single phone call. Grant masked his unease with anger. "Fine, you want the truth?" She shoved my chair, nearly made me spill wine worth more than her monthly paycheck. "I disciplined her." "That's called leadership." Daniel let out a slow exhale. "You assaulted an employee and called it leadership," Grant sneered. "You're sentimental because she has sad eyes. She's staff. Replaceable." Daniel's expression darkened. "No one is replaceable. Especially not someone you decided to kick while she was already on the ground." The manager whispered desperately. "Please, both of you, my job, our jobs, this will destroy us." But Grant wasn't listening. He pointed at Maya with venom. "She will sign the incident report, and when she does, this ends." Daniel stepped fully between Grant and Maya, blocking her from view. "Or," Daniel said quietly, "you end." Grant's face turned scarlet. "You're making threats now?" Daniel shook his head. No, I'm making a promise. Grant let out a bitter laugh. You wouldn't dare take me on. Daniel leaned in. I watched my wife die slowly for 2 years. I learned exactly how much pain a person can endure before breaking. I also learned what real courage looks like. He glanced back at Maya. And I just watched her show more courage than you've ever had in your life. For the first time, Grant found himself backing away. Not from Daniel's wealth, but from the truth standing behind him. Tonight's power dynamic had shifted. And Grant Wallace had no idea how dangerous that shift was. Grant finally snapped. You know what? He said, voice rising into a sharp, ugly pitch. Enough of this circus. He shoved the metal chair toward Maya, the legs screeching across the floor. She's done, fired, and I'll make sure every restaurant in this district blacklists her. She'll never work again. Maya's breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the chair, as if anchoring herself to the last shred of stability she had left. Grant pointed at the manager. Call security. I want her escorted out, now. And I want a police report drafted. She attacked me. Daniel stepped forward. Say that again. Grant smirked. With pleasure. She attacked me. That's my official statement, and the police will take my word over hers. Maya felt the room tilt. Her world, the only job keeping her and her daughter afloat, was collapsing. Grant continued, louder. She's unstable, violent, a liar. And if she resists, have her arrested. Daniel's voice cut in like a blade. No, she's not leaving, Grant scoffed. You don't get to decide that. Daniel's tone shifted, deep, steady, final. I do now. The room stilled. Every pair of eyes snapped toward him. He pulled out his phone. Screen glowing with a single recorded file. I have the entire assault on video. Grant froze mid-breath. The explosion had finally landed. Grant's face drained of color. Then twisted into something far uglier. A video? He spat. You think anyone will believe a shaky little clip over me? Over my reputation? Daniel didn't blink. It's crystal clear. Your voice, your kick, her plea. For a heartbeat, Grant hesitated. Then the mask split. Oh, please, he sneered. You people lie for a living. Drama, tears, victimhood. It's all you're good at. The room inhaled sharply. Maya stiffened as if struck again. The manager stared at Grant in horror. Even the dishwasher in the corner froze, his hands trembling above a stack of plates. Grant stepped closer, the venom rising with each word. She should be grateful she even has a job here. Grateful for scraps. Grateful to breathe the same air as civilized people. He glared at Maya. You think one little bruise makes you special? You're nothing but noise. Replaceable noise. Maya's eyes filled, but she didn't flinch away. Not this time. Daniel's jaw tightened. You just exposed exactly who you are. Grant barked out a laugh. No, Hayes, I exposed who she is. A problem, a liability, a mess waiting to happen. I kick one of them and suddenly I'm a monster? He threw his arms wide. They've always been sensitive, weak, overreacting to everything. The air thickened. The racism wasn't implied anymore. It was volcanic, undeniable, recorded. Daniel took a slow step forward. Is this how you speak to your employees? His voice was low, controlled, deadly. Grant scoffed. Don't act like you're some social hero. You're a millionaire playing savior to impress a waitress. Daniel's stare sharpened like ice. You kicked a woman who couldn't defend herself and then you blamed her for it. You humiliated her publicly. You weaponized her job, her skin, her vulnerability, and now you expect everyone to bow because your ego is allergic to accountability. Grant stepped nose to nose with him. Accountability doesn't apply to men like me, Daniel whispered. It does today. But the worst was yet to unfold. A timid voice broke the tension. Mr. Hayes, the dishwasher murmured. This isn't the first time. Grant spun around. You, shut your mouth! The dishwasher flinched, but Maya placed a hand on his arm. Daniel turned gently toward him. What happened? The boy swallowed. He's hit others. Thrown plates. Called us names. He told me once that if I ever spoke up, nobody would believe a kid like me. Grant advanced on the boy, Fury exploding, Daniel intercepted, blocking him with a single arm. "You lay one finger on him," Daniel warned softly, "and this becomes a criminal case." Grant's smug veneer shattered. His certainty cracked. Everyone in the room now saw the pattern, not a single incident, but a history of violence. A history about to collapse on top of him. The room shifted when Daniel finally straightened, not with anger, but with a controlled authority that made even the walls seem to stand at attention. Grant opened his mouth to bark another insult, but Daniel spoke first. "Grant," he said quietly, "do you know who you're threatening right now?" Grant scoffed. "A man sticking his nose where it doesn't belong?" Daniel shook his head. "No, you're threatening a board member of Hayes and Lockridge Investments, the firm that controls 27% of Wallace Capital's voting shares." Silence detonated across the room. The manager's jaw dropped. The dishwasher froze mid-breath. Even Maya blinked, stunned. Grant's smirk faltered. Just a flicker. "But enough," Daniel continued, voice steady as steel. "For 2 years, I watched my wife die in a hospital your company refused to support during its so-called charity campaign. I said nothing. I walked away. I let your arrogance, your ego, your cruelty exist without challenge." He stepped closer. "But tonight, you crossed a line even you can't rewrite." Grant's throat tightened. "You're bluffing." Daniel pulled out his phone again, not the recording this time, but an email thread. "My legal team is already on standby," he said softly. "Corporate misconduct, workplace violence, racial harassment, obstruction of incident reporting, multiple witnesses, a recorded assault, and a known history of degrading staff." Grant swallowed hard. "That's enough to trigger an emergency board inquiry," Daniel continued. "And if necessary, an immediate vote to suspend your executive powers." The color drained from Grant's cheeks. "You can't do that." Daniel's eyes lifted, calm but lethal. "I can. And I will," the manager whispered. "Sir, he really can." Daniel wasn't finished. He turned to Maya, his tone softening. "You deserve safety. You deserve dignity. You deserve the truth to matter." Then he looked back at Grant. "And you deserve every consequence coming your way." Grant attempted one last desperate pivot. "Fine, you want to negotiate? Tell me your price." Daniel's response was instantaneous. "This isn't a negotiation." He raised the phone with the recording. "This is accountability." And for the first time, Grant Wallace, the untouchable CEO, looked genuinely afraid. Grant lunged toward Daniel, desperate to snatch the phone. But Daniel stepped back with calm precision, thumb hovering over the screen. "I wouldn't," he said quietly. "One tap, and this recording is backed up to 3 encrypted drives." Grant froze mid-step. A new voice echoed from the hall. We heard everything. 2 servers. The bartender and the hostess, employees Grant had silenced for years, appeared in the doorway. Trembling but resolute, the bartender lifted his own phone. "I recorded it too," another server added. "And I emailed mine to HR already time-stamped." The walls were closing in now. Grant staggered, breath hitching. Daniel's voice lowered to a final devastating whisper. "It's over, Grant. Your version of the story just lost its last place to hide." Grant realized. The sting had snapped shut. The tiny office felt suddenly too small, too bright, too honest. Grant stood cornered, jaw tight, sweat gathering along his hairline as the weight of multiple witnesses settled on his shoulders like a collapsing ceiling. Daniel didn't raise his voice. "He didn't need to." "Grant," he said quietly, "you didn't just assault Maya tonight. You built an entire system that allowed you to hurt people without consequences." He stepped aside, making room for the trembling employees who had gathered the courage to stand behind him. The hostess, barely 20 years old, spoke first. "He threw a plate at me last month because his steak was overcooked. I wasn't even the server." The bartender swallowed hard. "He called me boy, and I'm older than him. When I complained, HR told me to understand cultural differences." The manager lowered his head, shame tightening his features. Mr. Wallace made me tear up 3 written complaints. He said keeping the staff quiet was part of my job description. Grant snapped, "You're lying! All of you!" But the dishwasher spoke next, voice cracking. "I have screenshots of the texts he sent me. He threatened to fire me if I took a sick day." He held up his phone, hands unsteady but determined. Daniel stepped forward again, his calm presence amplifying every revelation. "I asked my team to pull Wallace Capital's employee complaint records," he said. "We found 12 formal grievances, all dismissed, all covered up." Grant's breath hitched. "And that's just the paper trail," Daniel continued. "We dug deeper." He swiped his phone, projecting an email thread onto the manager's computer screen. The subject line hit like a hammer. "Handling problem staff. Confidential." Grant's own words filled the screen. "Discipline publicly. Humiliate privately. Replace quietly. Never let them feel safe. Fear keeps them efficient." Maya stared at the screen, her eyes filling not with fear but with clarity. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't overreacting. She wasn't alone. There was a pattern, a deliberate, cruel design. Daniel wasn't finished. He opened another file. A spreadsheet. Rows of payout figures. "This," Daniel said, "is the settlement ledger your board hid. 7 employees paid to stay silent. Non-disclosure agreements. Forced resignations." Grant's knees wobbled. "You can't prove anything," he whispered. Daniel's voice softened, almost pitying. "You proved it for me." He tapped the final file. Security footage, dated 3 months earlier, showed Grant shoving a server against a wall. Another video showed him berating a disabled host. Another captured him smashing a plate beside a pregnant employee. Every clip ended the same way. HR walking the victim out the door. And Grant adjusting his cufflinks as if nothing had occurred. Daniel looked around the room. This isn't a single incident. This is an ecosystem of abuse. The employees exhaled shakily. Years of fear unraveling in real time. Grant's voice cracked. "This is a smear campaign." "No," Daniel said gently. "It's your legacy." He turned to Maya, placing a steady hand on the back of her chair. "And now you're going to watch the empire you built on their suffering finally collapse." Grant trembled. Not from anger, but from the first taste of consequence. For the first time in a decade, the truth stood taller than him. The room had fallen silent, not because Grant demanded it, but because he no longer had the authority to break it. Daniel stepped forward, not as a millionaire, not as an investor, but as a man who had seen enough. "Maya," he said softly. "Stand with me." She rose slowly, clutching her side, but holding her dignity like a shield. Daniel turned toward Grant. A CEO stripped of the armor that once made him untouchable. "You talk about leadership," Daniel began, voice low, steady, resonant. "But leadership isn't domination. It isn't humiliation. It isn't fear." He paused. Every breath in the room hinged on his next words. "A leader protects. A leader elevates. A leader holds power the way a surgeon holds a scalpel. With precision, restraint, respect." Grant scoffed weakly. "Spare me the sermon," Daniel cut him off. "No, you'll hear this." He stepped closer. "You believe your money makes you superior. But money doesn't make a man powerful. How he treats the powerless does." Grant's gaze wavered. His chest rose and fell too quickly. For the first time, he looked small. "Breakable," Daniel continued, voice carrying the weight of every worker Grant had crushed. "You kicked a woman who asked for nothing but the chance to work with dignity. You terrorized employees who depended on you. You created fear and called it efficiency. You created silence and called it discipline." He motioned to the employees behind him. "But here's the truth you've never understood. Respect cannot be bought. Fear cannot be sustained. Power cannot survive when those below you stop kneeling," Maya whispered, almost to herself. "Power without empathy is cruelty." Daniel nodded gently. "And tonight, that cruelty ends." He looked directly at Grant. You broke the oath every leader should live by, to safeguard those who stand under your authority. But Maya, he turned to her fully, never broke hers, even when it cost her everything. Grant swallowed hard, his voice collapsing. What oath? The oath of humanity, Daniel said. The one you never learned. And with that, the final fracture in Grant's authority split clean down the middle. Grant stumbled backward as if Daniel's words had struck him physically. For years he had towered over this place, the loudest voice, the sharpest authority, the man whose footsteps alone could silence an entire staff. Now it was his turn to be small. Daniel pulled out a chair, the same metal chair Grant had shoved toward Maya moments earlier, and set it in the center of the room. Sit, Daniel said quietly. Grant's breath hitched. What? Absolutely not. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. For once in your life, he murmured, you will sit and listen. The manager, the servers, the young dishwasher, all watched as Grant hesitated, pride warring with fear. And then, with a trembling exhale, Grant lowered himself into the chair. The room shifted. The hierarchy inverted. Grant Wallace, CEO, King of Intimidation, was now the one being examined. Maya stood at Daniel's side, steadying herself with a hand on the table. She had never looked so fragile, or so powerful. Daniel turned toward the employees. Tell him, he said. Not me, not HR. Tell him what he did. The hostess stepped forward first, voice trembling but resolute. You scared me so badly I used to cry in the restroom before every shift, the bartender followed. You told me people like me were lucky to work under you. The dishwasher swallowed hard. You said I should remember my place. Sir, my place is not beneath your shoe. Grant flinched at each confession. Every word hit harder than the last. Maya stepped forward. Her ribs still ached. Her hands still trembled. But her voice was clearer than it had ever been. You kicked me, she said simply. You humiliated me in front of strangers. You treated me like I didn't matter. Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Maya continued. You said we were replaceable, but tonight you learned the truth. You're the one who can be replaced. You're the one whose power disappears when the people you step on finally stand up. Grant looked around the room, searching desperately for an ally, a defender, a single person still under his spell. There were none. Daniel knelt beside him, speaking softly. This is what accountability looks like, Grant. No boardroom, no lawyers, no polished spin. He gestured around them. Just the truth, and the people you thought would never rise against you. Grant lowered his head. The first surrender of his life, and Maya, the woman he once kicked to the floor, stood taller than anyone in the room. Grant sat hunched in the metal chair, his fingers gripping the edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. He looked less like a CEO now, and more like a frightened man watching his own empire crumble brick by brick. Daniel didn't rush. He moved with the calm certainty of someone who knew the truth was finally on his side. Grant Wallace, Daniel said, your employees have spoken. Your violence has been recorded. Your pattern is documented. He placed a folder on the table with deliberate care. And now, he continued softly, your consequences begin. Grant's eyes flicked to the folder. His throat bobbed. What? What is that? Daniel opened it. The first page, a summary from his legal team. Workplace violence violation, level 4 racial. Harassment, multiple instances. Suppression of complaints, verified endangering staff. Video evidence confirmed Grant's breathing grew shallow. Daniel flipped to the next page. Tonight's footage, he said, has already been transmitted to 2 attorneys, a digital archivist, and the board oversight committee. Grant jerked upright. You had no right. I had every right, Daniel replied. You committed a crime. I preserved evidence, Grant's voice cracked. You're destroying me. Daniel's expression didn't change. No, Grant, you destroyed yourself. I'm simply making sure the people you hurt are finally heard. The manager stepped forward reluctantly, hands shaking. "Mr. Hayes, the board is on a conference call. They want to speak with you." Grant tried to stand. "They want to speak with me." Daniel lifted a hand. "No, sit down." Grant froze, then slowly sank back into the chair as Daniel took the call on speaker. A woman's voice came through. Cold, authoritative. "Mr. Hayes, we received your preliminary evidence. The committee is prepared to enact emergency suspension procedures." Grant's face drained. No, please, listen to me," the voice continued without acknowledging him. "Per Section 12 of the Conduct Charter, Mr. Wallace's executive powers are revoked pending full investigation." Grant shook his head violently, panic rising. You can't do this! I built this company." The voice cut him off sharply. "And you dismantled it through your misconduct. Security will escort you from the premises. Your access cards are disabled. Prepare for legal correspondence in the morning." The call ended. The silence that followed was suffocating. Grant stared at the floor, eyes wide, as if he had just woken from a nightmare into something far worse. Maya exhaled slowly, her body trembling with the weight of everything she'd endured. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply breathed. For the first time without fear. Daniel crouched beside her chair. "You're safe now," he said gently. "No one will hurt you again." Her voice was barely a whisper. Why would you fight for someone like me?" Daniel looked at her with sincerity that softened every edge of his features. "Because my wife used to say that the measure of a man is how he treats those who have no power over him. And because you reminded me of her, the way you kept standing even when the world kept knocking you down." Tears filled Maya's eyes. Grant let out a broken sound. A man watching the last shard of his power dissolve. Security arrived at the doorway. "Mr. Wallace," one officer said. Grant didn't move at first. Then his voice cracked like splitting stone. "Please." But power no longer answered him. For the first time in his life, Grant Wallace was forced to follow. As he was led away, Maya held her ribs, and for the first time, felt the ache of healing rather than harm. When the door finally closed behind Grant Wallace, the entire room seemed to exhale, as if a storm had passed, leaving debris and shaken souls behind. Maya remained standing, one hand over her ribs, the other gripping the back of a chair not for fear, but for balance. Everything inside her was trembling. The staff didn't rush to her, not because they didn't care, but because none of them knew how to approach someone who had just survived the center of a hurricane. Daniel stepped forward first. "Sit," he murmured gently. Maya hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair Grant had occupied minutes earlier. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The manager approached with wet eyes. "Maya," he whispered, "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you." She looked at him, exhausted but calm. "You were scared," she said softly. "I understand." Her forgiveness broke something inside him. He sank to one knee, head bowed. "I let fear make me complicit. I won't let that happen again." Daniel placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." The staff slowly gathered around Maya, the dishwasher, the hostess, the bartender, each of them offering shaky words, small apologies, quiet confessions of nights they'd cried in storage rooms after one of Grant's outbursts. Their voices blended into something fragile but real, a chorus of people finally allowed to speak. Maya swallowed hard. "It wasn't just me," she said quietly. "He hurt all of us." They nodded. And for the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt surrounded, seen. Daniel stood and turned toward the staff. "Tonight changes everything," he said, voice steady. "There will be no retaliation, no whispered punishments, no sudden schedule cuts. I will personally guarantee that." The manager raised his hand timidly. Mr. Hayes, what happens to the restaurant? Daniel exhaled. That depends on the board, but one thing is certain. He looked at Maya. No workplace led by cruelty deserves to stay the way it is. He pulled out his phone again. Within minutes, his legal team was on the line. Daniel spoke clearly, deliberately. Yes, initiate the emergency oversight. I want all suppressed complaints reopened, every employee interviewed, every NDAs reviewed for coercion. The staff looked at one another, unable to believe what they were hearing. When the call ended, Daniel tucked his phone away and crouched beside Maya again. How's your breathing? She winced. Sore, but I'll be okay. Daniel's expression tightened. You need medical attention. Maya shook her head. I can't afford. You won't pay a cent, he said quickly. I'll take care of everything. Her instinctive protest faded when she met his eyes. This wasn't pity. It was respect. The dishwasher cleared his throat. What if the board brings him back someday? Daniel shook his head. They won't. Not after the footage. Not after tonight. And not with the pressure coming their way. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Grant operated in silence. Now the silence is broken. He can't rebuild what depended on everyone else staying afraid. The staff absorbed his words like light in a room that had lived too long in darkness. Maya tried to stand, but winced again. Daniel immediately offered his hand. Easy. She took it. Emotion flickered across her face. Pain, yes, but also relief, and something deeper. The realization that she wasn't fighting alone anymore. The manager stepped forward again. Maya, if you ever decide to stay here, this place will be different, I promise you. She gave a small nod. I need time, but thank you. Daniel turned to the staff. Go home. Rest. You've all carried too much for too long. One by one they left, quiet, shaken, yet somehow lighter. Soon it was just Maya and Daniel in the dim service office. He helped her into a jacket someone had left behind. Maya, he said softly, I'm going to make sure tonight becomes the last night anyone suffers under his name. Her eyes filled again. Not with fear, but with a fragile new hope. What happens next? She whispered. Daniel offered a hand, steady and certain. Next, he said, we rebuild. News traveled faster than the broken glass still glittering on the restaurant floor. By the time Daniel stepped outside with Maya guiding her carefully toward his car, the street already buzzed with flashing cameras, murmured questions, and the tense hum of scandal awakening. A reporter shouted first. Mr. Hayes, is it true the CEO assaulted a waitress? Another camera swung toward Maya. Ma'am, did he really kick you? Are you pressing charges? Daniel immediately stepped between her and the crowd, lifting a hand. No comments tonight, he said firmly. She's getting medical care first. But the cameras captured everything. The bruise forming along her ribs, the shaken way she walked, the expensive suit jacket Daniel had placed around her shoulders. It was already a headline. Before he even reached the car, his phone vibrated violently. Board chair, call me. Now. Corporate legal. Internal emergency. Sending documents. PR. Director, it's everywhere. Trending globally. Restaurant assault. Fire Grant Wallace. Daniel exhaled. The storm had begun. He opened the car door, helping Maya inside gently. Try to breathe slow, he whispered. We'll get you checked. Her voice was tiny. Is all this because of me? Daniel shook his head. No. It's because of him. You just survived it. As he closed the door, another message arrived. Governor's office. We need a statement. He ignored it. Inside the restaurant, the staff watched the chaos unfold through the windows. Some recorded, some cried. They weren't just witnesses anymore. They were evidence. Across the city, the first news alerts appeared. Breaking. CEO Grant Wallace, accused of assaulting restaurant worker in public meltdown viral footage. Emerges, billionaire heir intervenes to protect waitress witnesses, claim pattern of abuse inside. Luxury dining chain footage leaked, the cell phone recording from a busboy brave enough to press record while Grant lost control. The kick, the scream, Maya on the floor. Daniel stepping in, fury and restraint clashing in his body. Within 20 minutes, it had 3 million views. Within 40 minutes, it had 12 million. Corporate board members scrambled into emergency calls, the kind usually reserved for financial collapse or criminal investigations. In a penthouse miles away, Grant Wallace finally saw the footage. For the first time in years, his confidence cracked. He realized this wasn't going away. He couldn't buy his way out, couldn't bully his way out, couldn't silence this with NDAs or severance packages. Because this time, people were watching, and because Daniel Hayes, the one man whose name carried weight enough to shift markets, was in the center of the story. Inside a darkened corporate boardroom buzzing with crisis alarms, executives replayed the video in stunned silence. "This is catastrophic," one whispered. "This is criminal," another added. "This is the end," someone said quietly. Then the chair spoke. "Grant needs to be removed, immediately." Across the city, Daniel pulled into the hospital driveway. He turned to Maya. "This is the beginning of accountability," he said softly. Her eyes lowered. "And the end of his power?" Daniel nodded once. "No one survives this kind of truth." The world did not simply react. It detonated. By sunrise, Grant Wallace's fall had become the most viral corporate scandal of the decade. Millions watched the video on repeat. Every replay was another crack in the empire he'd built through fear, inheritance, and unchecked power. Financial meltdown. Begins at 6:12 a.m. Wallace Dynamics stock plummeted 27% within the first 9 minutes of pre-market trading. Investors panicked. Analysts called it a leadership integrity crisis. The SEC requested full incident documentation before the market even opened. Every news channel looped the moment Grant kicked Maya as if it were a trailer for a courtroom drama. Headlines flashed. CEO assaults employee. Criminal charges expected. Board silent as stock crashes. Waitress becomes central witness in corporate abuse case. Behind those headlines, a quiet terror grew inside the company's headquarters, a terror Grant could no longer ignore. 2. Boardroom revolt. In the 42nd floor boardroom, the directors sat grim-faced behind stacks of emergency reports. Grant stormed in, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot. "This is being blown out of proportion," he snapped. But no one looked at him with loyalty anymore. Only calculation. Only survival instinct. Patricia Lennox, the board chairwoman, tapped a folder with her index finger. "Grant, this is a complete disaster," she said. "You assaulted an employee on camera. Investors want answers. Regulators want answers. Half the country wants your head," Grant scoffed. "She shoved me first. It was self-defense." "It wasn't," Patricia replied coldly. "We have 4 witnesses, the raw camera footage, and the victim's medical report." Grant slammed his fist on the table. "She's lying!" "No," Patricia said. "You are." Silence fell like a gavel. Then came the words that shattered him. "The board is voting to remove you as CEO, effective immediately." Grant's jaw clenched so tightly it trembled. "You're betraying me? After everything I built?" One of the board members spoke quietly. "You didn't build anything. You inherited it, and then contaminated it." Grant's eyes flicked from face to face. "No allies, no escape. No control. Security will escort you out. Patricia said. It was the first time in his life someone had told him that word, escort, and meant it. Daisy Chain Revelations. Within. Hours of Grant's removal, something unexpected happened. Employees began talking. First one, then 6, then dozens. Anonymous emails flooded the company's internal ethics hotline. Stories of verbal abuse, unpaid overtime, threats, manipulated contracts, workplace intimidation. Maya's case was the spark. The wildfire had always been waiting for oxygen. Former employees came forward with documents, recordings, even photos. The pattern was undeniable. An HR assistant leaked a folder of complaints that had been intentionally buried. Line cook revealed that Grant once threw a ceramic plate at him. A former secretary admitted she'd been paid to sign a false statement protecting him during another incident. This wasn't a one-time assault. This was a history of violence. Every revelation drove the stock lower. By noon, the company had lost $3.1 billion in market value. Criminal investigation launches. District Attorney held a press briefing outside the courthouse. In light of publicly available video evidence, corroborating witness statements, and documented medical findings, we are launching a criminal investigation against Grant Wallace for assault, harassment, intimidation, and workplace abuse. Reporters erupted with questions. The DA continued, "We will be contacting the victim, Ms. Maya Thompson, as a key witness." Inside the hospital, Maya watched the broadcast from her bed. She didn't speak. She just breathed slowly, her fingers curled around the blanket. Daniel watched beside her, silent, protective. "Maya," he said softly, "they need your voice." She closed her eyes. "For the first time, someone needs my voice for something other than serving a table." Chew. Public pressure. Hits. Maximum level hashtags spread across the internet like wildfire. Justice for Maya. Fire Grant Wallace. Protect service workers. Her abuse in luxury chains, tens of thousands, marched outside. Wallace Dynamics headquarters chanting, "No more power without accountability." Restaurants across the city closed for 1 hour in solidarity. Service workers posted videos telling their own stories, broken ribs, shouted insults, threats from managers. Maya had become a symbol without meaning to. A symbol of everyone who had been told to smile and serve, while swallowing humiliation. Grant spirals locked out of his penthouse office. Grant's world shrank to a single luxury condo with blackout curtains drawn shut. Panic clawed at him. He smashed his phone against the wall after reading a text from his father. "You've disgraced the family name. Don't contact me!" Grant roared in frustration. His lawyer tried to calm him. "The DA is building a case. You need to stay quiet." "No," Grant snarled. "I need to win." But there was nothing left to win. Only consequences he had never believed would find him. Maya takes her first stand. 3 days after the incident, Maya stepped out of the hospital with Daniel's arm steadying her. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. "Miss Thompson, do you have a statement?" She inhaled. Her ribs hurt, but her resolve did not. "My name is Maya," she said softly into the microphones. "And I'm not afraid anymore." A ripple went through the crowd. "I want justice. Not just for me, but for every worker who has ever been treated like they're disposable." The world heard her. And something shifted, not just in law, not just in corporate offices, but in the hearts of millions who saw themselves in her trembling strength. The fall of Grant Wallace was no longer just a scandal. It had become a reckoning. The courtroom felt colder than any winter morning Maya had ever walked through. Marble floors, high ceilings, an audience of reporters silent as snow. Every seat filled, and at the defense table, Grant Wallace, once a king in tailored suits, now a hollow man in a wrinkled blazer, wrists trembling as he adjusted his tie. The bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise." Judge Emerson entered, stern, meticulous, feared for her uncompromising rulings. She sat. Everyone followed, Case number 4829, the clerk announced. State of California versus Grant Andrew Wallace. Even Grant flinched. He'd never heard his full name used with such finality. The prosecutor rose first, presenting the full tapestry of Grant's downfall. The viral video, the medical reports, the testimonies, the suppressed HR complaints, the pattern of intimidation, the deliberate acts of cruelty, the corporate cover-ups, the financial manipulation. And most damning of all, his complete lack of remorse, every piece built toward one truth. Grant didn't just make a mistake. He made a career out of abuse. Then it was time. Ms. Maya Thompson, the judge said gently. You may read your statement. The room shifted. Breaths held. Cameras stilled. The world leaned in. Maya stood slowly, a soft tremor in her hands, but fire in her eyes. Your Honor, she began, voice steady but scarred. I came to that restaurant every day just to survive. I never asked for anything except respect. But Mr. Wallace treated me like I wasn't human. I was kicked, humiliated, threatened, and told my truth didn't matter. A pause. A long, shaking inhale. But it did matter, because when I cried, people saw. When I fell, people stood for me. And when I broke, the world decided it was time to break a system, too. Grant looked down. In my life, Maya continued softly, I've met people who had nothing, yet still gave kindness. And I've met people who had everything, yet gave nothing. She turned her eyes to Grant. You could have chosen kindness. You didn't. Silence bloomed like thunder. Thank you, Ms. Thompson, the judge said, her voice touched by something fragile. You may sit. Then came the moment the nation had waited for. Judge Emerson lifted the sentencing document. Mr. Wallace, she said, your wealth does not shield you. Your status does not excuse you. Your power does not entitle you to harm another human being. Grant's jaw tightened. This court hereby sentences you to... He closed his eyes. 18 months in state custody for assault, harassment and retaliation. Gasps erupted. Mandatory anger management treatment. A lifetime ban from serving as a corporate officer. And a restitution payment to Ms. Thompson for physical injury, emotional suffering, and lost wages. Grant's mother burst into sobs. His lawyer dropped his pen. His father walked out before the sentence even finished. Grant remained frozen, not defiant, but broken in a way he had never imagined. As the bailiff approached to escort him, Grant whispered, Maya. I didn't think it would go this far. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Justice had already spoken, and for the first time, Grant walked where he never expected to be, through the rear door of a courtroom, in handcuffs. 1 year later, sunlight warmed the newly renovated Community Art Center. Children laughed in the courtyard. Workers painted murals. The once abandoned building had become a place of second chances because one person had refused to stay silent. Inside, Maya stood in front of a framed certificate, Thompson Arts Fellowship established by Daniel Westfield, his name, right beneath hers, in the year since the incident. Maya had completed trauma counseling training. She spoke at worker rights conferences. She became the ambassador for a national service industry protection program. Daniel donated $2 million to help reopen an art fellowship she once dreamed of joining. And she finally began painting again, not for survival, but for joy. On the wall hung her latest piece, a waitress, standing tall, holding a tray not with fear, but with pride. A soft voice came from behind her. You did all this, Maya, Daniel said. Not the incident. Not the headlines. You, she smiled, small, real, earned. I never wanted revenge, she said. I just wanted to be seen. And now the world sees you. He offered her a fresh canvas. Ready to paint the next chapter? Her eyes softened. I think, for the first time, I am. Outside the windows, a group of young women waited shyly. They wanted her autograph. Not because she was famous, but because she was proof that broken moments could become beginnings. Maya stepped into the sunlight. Her shadows no longer followed her. They walked behind her, learning to heal. Epilogue. Moralin. A world obsessed with titles, one woman proved something simple. You don't need power to be powerful. You just need the courage to stand. And one man learned far too late that cruelty carries a cost no fortune can erase. Justice isn't loud. Justice isn't fast. Justice is patient, and when the time is right, it arrives with both hands open. If Maya's journey moved you, if you've ever seen someone mistreated, if you believe in standing up when silence is easier, then don't leave yet. Hit subscribe, hit like. Share this story with someone who needs strength tonight, and tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed a moment where a single act of courage changed everything? Your story might inspire our next one.